Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to be with you today. It's Tuesday afternoon, and let me just give a couple of little things here of housekeeping. I want to thank all of you. Yesterday's podcast, we got so much response to question answers and emails that we got the most emails in one day that we've ever gotten yesterday. And so let me just remind you, because some of you got put to spam, one email a week. Other than that, there were some of you that emailed me 2 and 3 and 4 times yesterday, and I just want you to know the staff just put you right into spam. Um, I get too many, and so we just can't do that. And then the other thing is keep them short because when there's literally tons of emails to read, if they're just too long, they get deleted. So I don't even get to see them. So I'm asking you, make sure you keep them short. And remember, one email a week, and they keep track of that. I don't know how they do it, but they do. And too many, and you just get sent to spam because trust me, we get people that try to spam me. So I appreciate that, but we got a bunch more, so we're going to get back to do some more questions today, as well as some other things that I want to talk about with the team itself. So let's dig right in. Let me make sure that my phone's off. I apologize about that. And we're going to just dig right in and get right to your email. Now, we had a ton of people ask me about the NFL draft coming up in 2025. And as I alluded to you yesterday, I have done no research. Sure, I've watched a lot of games and I've seen guys and I have, but it's a very ignorant opinion. So what I did today is I just texted three guys that are in the NFL that are personnel people. And I just said, can you give me some names that maybe a lot of people aren't talking about um, that you're looking at or giving a long look to at quarterback? And so I'm going to talk about literally three guys today. I'm not saying any of these is the number one choice. I'm not saying anything, but I'm just giving you some names that I'm hearing. These are guys that once the Raiders are officially out of the playoffs, then I'll start to turn my attention there a little bit. And then once the season is over, you guys know I am just pounding it and I'm all on it. And then we're talking about it. We bring guests on the podcast to discuss it. So, but let's get to it a little bit. So one name that I'm hearing that, and what I did is I asked them just for some names maybe that were emerging guys, like last year. There were some emerging guys. Just what do they think? All three guys brought up Quinn Ewers. All three guys thought that he has shown a lot of maturity, that they like him. All three guys, however, have said the biggest drawback against him is injury. Injury. Remember, all three of these guys like Jaden Daniels last year too, but all said because of his size and frame, the way he plays, there's sincere concern about injury. And you're seeing that now with him. Great player. All three of these guys thought Jaden Daniels was great. They just weren't sure that his frame would work out in the NFL. Quinn Ewers is a little bit different. He's got the frame, but he has at least shown some penchant for being injured. But they like his maturity. They like the fact that he started. I think he started at Ohio State. I mean, yeah, he did start at Ohio State, but they love the maturity that they're seeing for him. Obviously, the prize in Texas is Arch Manning, but Quinn Ewers is not to be overlooked. And matter of fact, one of them was very emphatic. Don't overlook Quinn Ewers. The only concern there is injury issues, but all three. So the three guys I'm going to give you today um, all had these three guys. All three mentioned one other guy, but said they have not done enough research to comment on him, good or bad, but they're going to. I'll mention that one as well. Um, Probably. The next guy is a guy that I talked to you about last year. You may remember last year on the podcast, we had the guy that's universally accepted in the NFL as one of the best quarterback minds and scouts in Drew Stanton. And Drew talked about all the quarterbacks last year. Well, one guy, when we asked him looking ahead to this draft, and he mentioned was the Ole Miss quarterback, Jackson Dart. So I reached out to these three guys today. All three mentioned Jackson Dart. They like him. They're intrigued by him. One said he may be the most NFL ready right now of all the quarterbacks. Um, that absolutely a guy, if you're looking for a guy to come in and start and be able to handle it and work, that Jackson Dart may be that guy. I thought that was pretty interesting, especially the guy it came from. He's a guy that's at Ole Miss, started at USC. But again, Jackson Dart is a guy that all three agreed on. Again, I asked for guys that maybe other people aren't talking a lot about. So that's why you're not seeing some other guys in this. And then the third one was a guy who hasn't declared for the draft, but he's NFL people are all watching and they all think he could be really interesting. And it's Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. So I would just keep your eyes on those three. There's obviously more. We're gonna those guys are gonna keep digging. We're gonna have a lot more for you, but I'm kind of starting to give you names so you guys can start watching, and which I think will be interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of interest around Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot of certainly excitement around him with fans. Um, I have no idea what NFL people think of him. I've not yet had those conversations with them. I know Carson Beck at Georgia. There's a lot of people that um, like his game on the field. Um, um, there are questions about him. They're not a character like a bad guy or character as in bad things. I just think maybe there's some relatability questions. And if a guy's going to lead your franchise, how's that look? I do think there are some Carson Beck and there's other guys. So I'm not giving you anything definitive, but you guys have asked me literally, let me just read you one. It comes to some Carol and Carol B. And Carol is from Stockton, California. Hondo, I know yesterday that you said you weren't going to talk quarterbacks. I respect you for that. But can you maybe give us some names that your guys are at least intrigued by so we can watch games? So there you go, Carol, in Stockton. But there were several like this one. And so there's three. And I'll just say this there's a lot of interest. In fact, one of the guys I talked to's told me he's headed up to the uh, Indiana game this week to watch the Indiana quarterback. He was a transfer that came over there to play with Signetti. I don't know anything about him. Um, but that's the fourth guy I told you that all of them said they themselves haven't put their eyes on them, but that's a quarterback that's at least intriguing some people. I have no idea if or any expectations are on him. So don't run. Hey, Hondo said the guy at Indiana is a first rounder. I did not. Somebody's going to say it, but at least those of you that watch the podcast will be informed. So there you go. Next one comes to us, and I thought this one was really funny. It comes to us from Jeff T. And Jeff T is from Chicago, Illinois. And this is what Jeff said. Hondo, I noticed something. Since it became pretty clear that Tom Brady was going to be finalized at some point this year, the referees have been terrible to us. Do you think the NFL is punishing the Raiders because Tom Brady's finally here and he's a Patriot? No, I don't feel that way at all. Now I'm gonna make a statement here, and Jeff, this is not directed towards you. I have been very vocal that there have been bad calls, and I'm always going to be vocal if I think there is a bad call. And I see bad calls every game. Now, some game you may see a couple more against the Raiders, but then you'll see. But there have been other times this year when I've said, "Hey, Raiders got away with one there," or "Hey, that was not a good call against the other team. The Raiders benefited there." Um, I have only seen probably two games in my entire life where I really felt like it at least had the feeling of there was bias among the referees. I've seen a lot of bad calls and I've called them out. But knowing refs and being friends with some refs, um, I know how that works. And so, no, I do not think that Tom Brady being an owner has had anything to do whatsoever at all with the referee calls. And I've seen some bad ones, so I'll make that clear. Next one comes to us from Brenton M. in Gresham, Oregon. Hondo, do you think the Raiders would sign another bridge quarterback next year, take the best player available in preparation for a better quarterback class in 2026? Well, first of all, I don't know that it's a better quarterback class. I've not asked that question. And because that's not my purview, I can't address that. But I can tell you, I will be stunned based on everything I'm hearing. They know that they need a quarterback, and that is the direction that they're going. So I'll just say for now that there are a lot of different ways that they could address a quarterback. I'm not gonna use any names because then somebody runs and says Hondo says this. But what if there's some guy named Jeff T who's a second string quarterback on another team that the Raiders are like, man, we really like this guy. Well, let's just randomly use Hendon Hooker, okay? Because I know the previous regime liked Hendon Hooker. So let's say that they just really liked Hendon Hooker. And they're like, wow, we could maybe trade and go get a Hendon Hooker. Maybe maybe it would be another player. I don't know who. I know that they feel like they have to address long-term situation at quarterback. There's an old adage in the world of football, and I agree with it. I think it's a little different in college because in college, you're recruiting one quarterback a year. But it's if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. I think the Raiders understand they need a quarterback. They need one. Okay. The next one comes to us. And so, yeah, do I think that I think it very no, I could see them taking a rookie and signing one or keeping Aiden as the backup. That's kind of what I think is the more probable scenario. That's what I think. But we shall see at this point. It's way too early. Um, way too early. The next one says, this one's kind of funny. This is from Derek N. And Derek is from Trenton, New Jersey. Hondo, I heard you mention yesterday about AP being in a battle. I also heard you make it very clear that you weren't calling for anything to happen to AP and that you felt like with all the injuries and no quarterback, it is not a fair scenario to judge him after 1 year. You also made it very clear, however, if he was terminated, he'd get paid according to his contract, and that's the business side. What blew my mind was you mentioned the name Mike Vrabel. Care to elaborate? No. Next. This one comes to us from Mike D. Mike D is in Lafayette, Louisiana. Honda, with all of our cap space, do you think we go out and pick up some high profile players before the NFL trade deadline? No. Nope. Now, if they could go get a exponentially improving player that's young on a rookie contract uh, or has 3 years left, maybe 2 years left, maybe. But no, I don't see them doing that, Mike. I think that the Raiders are going to come into next year with over $100 million in cap space. They continue to lose, they're going to be in a really good position with a very high draft pick. Now, this kind of goes back to where you mentioned bridge quarterback. If they go through all of their analysis and they say, listen, there is not a quarterback here that we feel like is our guy, I guess you could see a scenario, but I think there's enough people there that if they're able to get to one of them, I think they'll get a quarterback. And I think if you trade now for a guy, you got to give something up. And I just think that they'll Again, if it's a very special player that has a unique deal, yes, but I don't see that coming. Next one comes to us from Chip, and Chip is Chip B. Chip is in Phoenix, Arizona. Hondo, longtime Raider fan since 1962. Love the team, love the Raiders, love you. I know you've always said Max Crosby is untouchable. Is there anyone else on this team that you would consider untouchable? Brock Bowers. That's it. Those are the two guys that will not, those are the two guys that the Raiders at this point won't move on from. Those two. Now, you say that, but remember, I'm from the North Country, and people from the North Country who grew up watching hockey, understand if Wayne Gretzky can get traded from a Canadian team to Los Angeles, you never say no to any trade. But no, I think those two are lock-ins, that they're not going to go anywhere. But somebody does something stupid, you never know, do you? Dear, dear. That's pretty interesting. It's a good email, by the way. Next one I thought was really interesting. Hondo, can you tell me why Zamir White last year, after Antonio Pierce took over, was the best running back in the NFL, yet this year he struggled? Yeah, how brilliant do we look? We let a great running back in Josh Jacobs go. And this comes to us from uh, C Darius, the letter C Darius, and C is from Dallas, Texas. Well, first of all, he was the best running back after AP took over, and they adjust the scheme some. Early in the year, certainly the offensive line was struggling. I think the offensive line is a little bit more solidified with the rookies. Obviously, some rookie mistakes, but still solidified with the rookies. I think Alexander Madison's been good. I mean, you talk about Josh Jacobs being great, but he missed games every year, and he would have come at a huge cost. I would not have been against them signing Josh Jacobs if it would have been a reasonable deal, but to have given him the deal that the Green Bay Packers gave, I mean, that they would have had to beat, would have been foolish. They had an offer on the table to him that they had every reason to truthfully believe he was going to sign. And I had already written an article that Raiders take too big of gamble on Jacobs' deal. So there you go. I think Zamir is still an extremely talented young man. He's young. He's a very good running back, but it just proves, sometimes it's the system. There are people that would tell you that Jim Plunkett at one point in his career was a bust and terrible. Raider Nation loves the guy. Why? He came to a system that fit him. It's not just a player. Do you remember back during the draft when Delmar DJ Glaze, the mule, was being drafted? And I said, people are talking about, why would the Raiders pick this guy? There's somebody higher than him. Well, but they weren't higher if they didn't fit within the system the Raiders run. This is why sometimes it's frustrating to me, because people have they read a magazine or they see a big board. Oh, this guy's a better tackle. Okay, but maybe a corner. Okay, there were some corners that were more highly rated than DeCamerion Richardson, but there weren't guys in the Raiders book higher who play the system the Raiders play. So all of that has to go into it. All of that is something that has to be thought out, all of it. And I think that is a major deal that people need to recognize. The next one, Hondo, what were your thoughts on the Raiders not going after Ryan Tannehill, instead getting Desmond Ridder? Be honest. Claire V. Well, first of all, I would hope that you would know that I'm always going to be honest with you. I think it said a couple of things. First of all, I'm not so sure that Ryan Tannehill wants to come out of retirement. He's made a ton of money in his career. So money would not have been the motivating factor for him. Uh, I know that because although I am not friends and I don't, I've talked to him a few times at NFL stuff, but I'm not a friend of Ryan. I do know people who are. I know he's very comfortable in retirement. So I don't know if he's in football shape or not. Number two, I don't know if he wants to play. Number three, I'm not so sure he'd want to play for a 2-5 team. So I think all of those. And number four, we don't even know if the Raiders called. I have been intimated to me that they didn't, but I'm not reporting that as factual. It's just intimated to me. So I don't know. That being said, I think Desmond Ridder was a safe pick. And right now, I think the franchise is in a play it safe mode. We'll leave it there. The next question really addresses that. Hondo, were you surprised the Raiders signed Desmond Ridder and didn't go try to trade either for a Michael Penix, a Spencer Rattler, or even a Hendon Hooker with the Lions? No, I'm not surprised at all. I think the Raiders, and I'm sorry, that comes to us from Troy T. Troy T, and Troy's in Detroit. No, I'm not surprised at that. Again, they're in a safe mode. I think they're in a let's just kind of get through this year. I would be stunned to have seen the Raiders go out and make that kind of a move for a lot of different reasons. Some of them I don't really want to get into right now. I don't think this is the time of year to get into them. I will later. But I think the Raiders are trying to evaluate every part of their franchise right now and make long-term thoughts. So I just think that the mentality is probably if Hendon or Penix or somebody is going to be available now, they would be available at the end of the year when maybe the Raiders um, refocus all of their attention on the future of the franchise and maybe make decisions then. They may look at the quarterback class, and say, there's nobody here we really like. But, and I only because I've used the name Hendon Hooker, I'm not suggesting it. I'm just using it as an example. Let's say that they say, but you know what? Hendon Hooker is a guy, okay, we like better than all these, so let's go make a big trade for him. Possibly. Plus, you have to understand those other teams have to have him available. If those guys aren't available, okay, I'm hearing from people around the NFL that the New Orleans Saints would trade Derek Carr if somebody wanted him. I don't know that, but I'm hearing it from enough NFL people that, based on my belief of experience, based on uh, wisdom, it's probably the truth. But I know this. I've heard nothing but the Lions love Hendon Hooker, and if nobody else in Atlanta likes Penix, certainly the GM does. So there you go. That I hope answers the question. The next one comes to us, and this one was very interesting to me. Comes from Chris T. And Chris T is in Boulder, Colorado. Chris T says, Hondo, I'm a lifelong Raider fan. I love the team. What would you think of the Raiders trying to go do a big trade for a defensive end, another big time stud like Max Crosby? Well, first of all, Chris, I don't know that there's a lot of studs out there like Max Crosby who have that much time on their contract. Number one. Number two, what are you going to give up? I mean, everyone wants to go trade, but remember, when you trade, you give something up. So what are you going to give up? Those kind of guys aren't going to come. A stud, let's just use TJ Watt, who's not available. Okay. But how much time is TJ going to want to play? That's fair. Okay. So let's say you got to go get TJ Watt. It's a couple of first rounders. Do you really want to give up a couple of first rounders on another edge rusher? when quarterback is the most important position in the NFL and you're probably going to be quarterback shopping next year? I wouldn't think so. I mean, maybe if a guy's a free agent, okay, but no, I would totally respectfully disagree with that. Totally and respectfully disagree with that. I don't see that as a scenario anywhere remotely. Here's the whole thing, and a Raider fan does not want to hear this. But you know me, I'm gonna report to you the factual situation. I think the Raiders right now are trying to find their sea legs, and you have a young regime. You have new ownership that's going to have a loud voice. I'm not in any way saying Tom Brady's up there with a blowhorn dictating this, but if you think for 1 second Tom Brady's not going to have a say in the future of this franchise, then you literally don't know who Tom Brady is. He is a football savant as a player. Now, we don't know what he'll be as an executive or an owner. We don't know that. But I think certainly you can look at his ability as a player and identify him as, if you're going to bet on somebody. It's like if you're a college coach trying to recruit a quarterback and you're not sure, are you always going to take the kid whose last name is Manning? Of course. Why? Track record, family, you know how they raise quarterbacks in that family. If you're trying to look at somebody who's going to have a loud voice in your organization, don't you want somebody who is arguably the greatest player in the history of the league? I know there are a lot of people that don't like Tom Brady because he is a Patriot. I know there are a lot of people that don't like Tom Brady, because of whatever reasons. But the point of the matter is the Tom Brady's the guy that everybody loves when he's on your team, unless he beat your team. And now he's an owner. He's not playing quarterback. But I certainly think he's going to have a voice. So then you have to look at, okay, if Tom's going to have a voice, he's going to want to get in there and look. How much of a voice is Mark Davis going to let him have? I believe Mark's going to let him have a very strong voice. It's my opinion, but it's an opinion based on people I've talked to who I trust that have told me that. If that's the case, I think the Raiders right now are trying to figure out where they are as an organization. I think everyone connected to the Raiders, whether it's fans, media, owners, coaches, would say that the Raiders, as of this moment, do not have a clearly defined franchise quarterback. I don't think that's brain surgery. And in this league, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a team. I also think that most people would agree there are a lot of really good parts on this team. There are. Okay. But then you have to look at Robert Spillane, a stud player, absolute stud player. Okay. Do you extend him? I think those are all questions that have to be asked. Okay. You've got Malcolm Kuntz coming back. I believe the thought with Kuntz is you give him a 1-year deal, maybe a 2, to show that he's healthy. And if he's back proving what he was last year, you rip up the deal and you renegotiate. Okay. Maybe the Raiders may change that opinion. There may be another team that says, oh, we've checked him out medically. His knee's great. We're willing, because edge rushers are so important, to give him a longer term deal. Malcolm may bet on himself and say, no, I want the 1-year deal so then I can get big money. I may get a 4-year deal with somebody else for good money. But if I wait, I may get a 1-year deal, but then follow it up with a 4-year deal with, massive money. There's just too many questions right now. And I think those are all things that are being asked, and all things that this team is trying to look at. I think Desmond Ridder is a guy that has some talent. I don't think he's an earth shaker. I'm not implying that he is. But I think he was a safe pick. Now, Raider fan doesn't want to hear that. They don't want a safe pick. I see. I'm not arguing that point, but they don't just grow generational quarterbacks on a tree. And most of those guys are picked, and very few of them get to free agency. And those that do get to free agency, there's usually a really good reason. And we'll leave it right there. You can figure out those reasons for yourself. But again, that's just kind of where the whole process is. I thought this next email was pretty enlightening, and pretty enlightening for a lot of different things. Dear Hondo, I am so excited about the Brock Bowers pick. I remember the night of the draft when you talked about the Raiders got a generational talent, and he's absolutely showing it. Should we be concerned that he holds out till the Raiders get a quarterback? And this is from Carlos Carlos R, and Carlos lives in Fresno, California. No, I would not even be remotely concerned about that at all. No. Then I'm going to end with this one because I think this one is unique. I want to preface before I read this one. No, I'm going to read two more. This one comes to us from Madison F. Madison says, Hondo, as Raider fans, do you think it would benefit us to just say we're not going to buy any tickets, no merchandise, and nothing until Mark Davis sells the team? I know that you have been pretty vocal over the last several months, maybe a year, at Mark growing into a good owner. But at what point do we just demand a new owner? Well, you can demand anything you want. It's not going to happen, number one. And number two, I don't know what people expect from Mark. And I want to I want to preface this by saying I think that you guys have gotten a front row seat to the metamorphosis from Mark Davis. I think it's pretty impressive. He was able to move the team here without any fight with the NFL. The Raiders have gone from a team that perpetually was in financial struggles to a franchise that now is flowing in milk and honey. They are flowing in the money. They have the very best practice facility in the NFL. I've been to a ton of them. There's none that compares. Absolutely none that compares. That facility is stunning. Matter of fact, the other day I was walking up to the facility, and I do this every morning. When I'm walking up to the facility, I just thank God for the privilege of covering this team. I pray for all of you guys and gals and your families, and I just literally walked in. I was walking out of the locker room, and there was one of the Raiders support staff. I don't know his name, or I would mention him. I apologize. And I said, "This is such a beautiful place. You're fortunate to work here." And he goes, "It's a great place to work for." I said, "Yeah, but the building," I said, "it's one of the best in the NFL." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And I told him, I said, "I've been to a bunch of them. This is a good one." Um, and it is. It's stunning what Mark has done. It's literally stunning what Mark has done. Allegiant Stadium, in my opinion, best stadium in the NFL, and it's not close. I don't like SoFi at all. I mean, I think it's nice. The people there are fantastic. Big shout out to the people that work at SoFi. But I don't like SoFi in the least bit at all. I like Jerry's World in Dallas. I think that's a very beautiful stadium. I don't think it's as nice as Allegiant, but I think it's phenomenal. Again, I like Seattle. There's a bunch that I like, but the Raiders have all of it. And you now have an owner that's willing to stroke any check if he thinks it can get him a Super Bowl. And you may not always like who he's listened to. That's certainly your right as a fan, but he is doing his absolute best to listen to the right people. He's making the effort. He's letting his football people do stuff and stay out of the way. I'm sorry. Some of y'all, I know you're frustrated with the franchise, and I think that's germane, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of bad owners in the National Football League, and Mark's not one of them. And you can say, oh, Hondo's saying that because he works for the team. I don't. Hondo's saying that, or he'll get his credentials pulled. That's a lie. It's just not true. And time will tell if Tom Brady's a good addition to the ownership team. If you're being fair, I think you absolutely have to say, okay, this looks like it could be a very good plus for the Raiders. That's just being fair. Now, Tom's going to have to prove that. But I'll tell you one thing that I know about Tom Brady. He's never been afraid of having to prove himself. Ever. Ever. So I don't think that would bother Tom if any of you said, hey, Tom was probably a good choice, but he's going to have to prove it. Okay. That won't bother Tom. But no, I think some of you need to understand and do your research on the NFL owners. And if you did and realize what Mark is willing to do, I know this in the NFL, not among ownership likes him, the other owners. So this is, I don't mean this that ownership doesn't like Mark. But if you talk about executives in the NFL, Mark carries a ton of respect. If Mark picks up the phone to go hire an executive, unless it's somebody who's completely locked in with his team, I think almost anybody listens to that call. I mean, there was a reason, even though everyone knows that they were unsuccessful, Josh McDaniels could have went a lot of places. He picked the Raiders. And again, and I realize nobody looks at it the way they did then, but that was just a statement of the respect that Mark Davis has. So no, I think Raider fan needs to accept, okay, you know what? Al did not groom him and mold him to be an owner. He's had to learn on his own. Has he made some mistakes? I believe he has. And you know what? I will never, ever betray Mark Davis or any person when I have a confidential conversation. I am going to reveal a conversation that I had with someone in my deep dive article of Devontae Adams, which comes out on the Thursday of the bye week at noon Eastern. But that was not a confidential conversation. I mean, it was a conversation that was with no one around, but it was made clear at some point I would probably report about it. I'll talk more about that at the time. But uh, anytime I've privately talked to Mark, I've always said this is private, and I would not betray him, nor would I anyone else. But I will tell you, I believe that Mark Davis is almost obsessed with wanting a Super Bowl. I think that is the driving force in his life right now. I 100% believe that. Um, I have found Mark to be a person of integrity, and I respect that. I have found him to be a person that is a tremendous listener, asks very probing questions. I think he asked the right questions. I've been very impressed. I knew he was a smart businessman, but I've been very impressed with not only the questions he asked, but how he asked them. So no, I don't think Mark Davis is the problem. Now you can look and say, but throughout all of Mark's leadership they haven't won. Okay, well, you can say that a lot about a lot of owners. A lot of things have to go right. I know of one guy that's universally considered a crap owner in the NFL who's just gotten away with a lot because he had a really good quarterback. When I say gotten away with a lot, I don't mean criminal activity, just people don't know how bad of an owner is because he had a quarterback. Okay, now you may say, well, he had a great quarterback in Derek Carr. Okay, that's certainly your opinion, but would any one of us say that at this point Derek Carr was in the league of a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud? I certainly think Derek Carr was a very good quarterback. I don't think he was ever among an elite name. I've shared this with you before. I had a general manager once tell me there are 8 teams in the NFL that are 100% convinced they have a quarterback that can go win them a Super Bowl at any time. There are 8 that think they have that quarterback, of which I think Derek fits in that mold when he was with the Raiders. I don't think he fits in it now, but I think he did at the time. And then 16 that are wanting to get into the top 8. And that second tier of 8 wants to get up in the top 8. So I think a quarterback covers a multitude of sins in the NFL. Or just hitting the jackpot. I mean, is Bob Kraft as respected as he is today without a Tom Brady and a Bill Belichick? I think we all would probably say probably not at the level he is. I mean, he's the most powerful owner in the NFL. Take away Belichick, take away Brady. Is he still? I don't think anywhere at the level he is now. So again, I don't think that marks the issue, but you're welcome to think about anything you want. However, I think that over 5 years of covering this team, I've earned at least the respect of some of you to know I'm not being disingenuous with Mark. The last email I want to address, because I think it's really fair, and I don't know that I would equate it as a criticism of me. I think it's somebody just being really truthful. And I wanted to address it because I just thought it was beautifully written. It comes to us from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Peggy K. Peggy says, Hondo, I love the Raiders, and I really love your coverage of the Raiders. I find you to be incredibly respectful, at times a little bit annoying respectful. I think you hold back. I don't know that I agree with that, but I think you're being fair. But I've heard you mention several potential Pro Bowlers at different positions. Can you go back and revisit that? And do you think that you were wrong? Okay, let's go back and visit. I've told you AJ and Daniel, Pro Bowlers. I don't think anybody doubts that. I told you Max is a Pro Bowler. I don't think anybody doubts that. I told you I thought Robert Spillane last year should have been a Pro Bowler, and that I totally thought he should have been, and I stand on that. There are many people around the NFL that told me they thought he got robbed of a Pro Bowl last year. I think he's having a good year this year, very good year this year. But you're 7 games in. I told you that I thought Jack Jones would be a Pro Bowler this year. I absolutely did. And him and I talked about this last week in the locker room and about my prediction. And he appreciated me saying it. Has he been one this year? Not at all. Almost every day in training camp, he was getting interceptions. He was moving guys around. He was playing out of his mind. So I had every reason. And you saw it even in the preseason games. So I said that. I own it 100%. All right, Jacoby Myers. I said I thought Jacoby Myers would be a Pro Bowler. 100%. I still think Jacoby Myers is a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, 100%. And at the end of this year, or excuse me, when I read our deep dive, I think you'll see a little bit more of what hurt Jacoby, and then now he's injured. I think wide receiver, though, is a tough spot because you got to be able to get the guy the ball. But we'll get into more of that when I do the deep dive. But so those are the ones I told you that I thought this year, Jack Jones and Jacoby Myers. And I own it, Peggy. one thing with me, I promise you, if I say it, I'll own it. And I own that. And if you'd been at training camp and saw him every single day getting picks and the way he was playing, I think you would have felt that way as well. Um, but again, I had a great conversation with Jack about my prediction last week in the locker room, and I stand by it. Here's one more I want to address. I look at the time here. Oh, gee, okay, I'm going to hurry on this one. But this one comes from a guy who named W.T. Williams, Mr. Williams. Dear Mr. Carpenter, my grandson really likes Jack Jones. I want to buy him a jersey because that's what he'd like for Christmas, but I'm not sure. I don't like to buy jerseys of current players. I prefer to buy jerseys of proven OGs. And for those of you that don't know, that stands for original gangster. And it's not like guys were gangster, it just means old guys who were good. I just learned that a while ago. And just in case anybody doesn't know what an OG was, because when I first few times I heard it, I had no idea what it meant. Um, but my grandson really likes Jack Jones. Is he a good person? And what would you think if your son wanted a Jack Jones jersey? All right, I'm going to tell you this. Okay, I love Jack for a lot of reasons. Um, I respect Jack for a lot of reasons. I admire him. Um, there are a lot of things that he and I are different on. Um, and but I just tremendously respect him. He's resilient. Um, he is a guy that's not a finger pointer. Um, he is a guy that uh, takes personal responsibility when he screws up. I love people like that. He's a guy that's had some tough times. Excuse me. And I believe if you were to ask Jack, Jack would tell you that 99% of his problems have been himself. I can deal with that. If you're looking for somebody that's humble and talented, somebody that when he messes up, he's man enough to say, I messed up. If you're looking for somebody, I would not have a problem with my son wearing a Jack Jones jersey. And I like him. And I think he is a guy that um has, when you look at his life story and what he's come from and all that he's gone through and what he's been able to do with his life, it's a testimony. It's a testimony. And I respect him for it. And I genuinely like him. I I I like people who have some scars. I like people that have had to pick themselves up. I like people who have been through some stuff. I say this a lot, and I believe it. Everybody has a past, but by the grace of God, everybody has a future, and I believe in that. And if you're watching this today, and maybe you've gone through some tough times in your life, and maybe some of them have been self-induced, that's not a death sentence on your life. You can tie your shoelaces, pick up the things, take responsibility, and I think you can learn from a Jack Jones. Thanks for joining us, everybody. See you back here tomorrow.